Hey everyone! Tonight, we're stepping into a moment I wish I could erase, a moment frozen in time, when joy turned to something else entirely. The soft sound of baby coos, the scent of warm milk and fresh paint in a nursery. These were supposed to be signs of new beginnings, but instead, I stood there, clutching a little stuffed lamb, while the world I thought I belonged to slowly closed its door. You might not survive this one. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. The moment I stepped into Jason and Samantha's home, I felt it, not in anything said, but in the air itself. It was too still, too polite, like everyone was waiting for something to happen, but praying it wouldn't. Jason gave me a quick hug, half-hearted, distracted, and Samantha was already seated on the couch. Her baby boy, Ethan, nestled close to her chest. I'd brought a small gift, a plush lamb, cloud-soft and wrapped in silver paper. A little something to mark the first time I was meeting my grandson. My heart was swelling. I wanted to hold him, to inhale that sweet baby smell and hum the lullabies I once sang to Jason when he was this small. Samantha looked exhausted. Her hair was knotted back in a messy bun. Her eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. Jason hovered nearby like a man trying to fix something with no manual. I took a cautious step closer, smiling. My voice came out soft, almost trembling. "May I asked?" And in that moment, something flickered in Samantha's eyes. I can't say for certain what it was: fear, resentment, maybe both. It was there, and then it was gone. But her body told me what her words soon would. She pulled Ethan just a little closer, pressing him to her chest. "Don't touch my baby." "Not our baby, my baby." 3 words that cracked something deep inside me. The kind of crack that starts small, but you know is going to split you wide open later. There was a hush. Even Jason looked stunned, caught between loyalty and confusion. My hand, still holding the gift, felt suddenly awkward. I didn't know whether to place it somewhere, hand it over, or just vanish through the floor. I managed to smile wobbly, not quite convincing, and nodded. I didn't cry, not then. Instead, I walked slowly over to the coffee table and set the toy lamb down beside a pile of unopened mail. I whispered something like, "He's beautiful, but I doubt anyone heard." I turned, opened the door, and stepped out into the evening air. The door closed with a soft click behind me. No drama, no slam, just finality. Outside, the sun was dipping low, casting everything in that golden haze that makes even pain look poetic. I stood there for a moment, breathing in dry leaves and distant traffic, trying to gather myself. Inside, I could still hear the faint, muffled sound of Ethan crying like an echo from a world I wasn't allowed into. I wanted to believe Samantha was just tired, that she didn't mean it, that tomorrow I'd get a text, a call, anything to let me know things hadn't changed forever. But something heavier settled over me, and I knew, a mother always knows, something had shifted, maybe for good. I made my way down the porch steps, gripping the railing like it might steady me. The weight of years pressed down scraped knees I'd kissed, birthday cakes I'd baked, nights I'd sat up with Jason while he battled the flu and nightmares and grief. All of it suddenly felt so far away. I got in my car and sat there, fingers trembling against the steering wheel. I didn't start the engine right away. I just stared through the windshield, watching the glow in their living room, a world still turning without me. For a moment, I thought about calling my friend Diane, but what would I even say that my daughter-in-law had claimed sole ownership of a baby I'd waited my whole life to meet? It felt so ridiculous, so personal, so public. I drove home in silence. No music, just the hum of tires and my thoughts spiraling. The lamb toy was still vivid in my mind. I'd spent a full hour picking it out. I'd even tucked a handwritten note inside, thinking I'd give it to Ethan when he was old enough to read. Something to remind him that from the very beginning, he was loved by someone who would have done anything to be a part of his world. That night, I sat in the rocking chair I'd repainted for the nursery cream-colored, soft and smooth from hours of sanding. I'd imagined Samantha sitting in it, humming lullabies. I'd imagined myself there too, holding Ethan, rocking him to sleep. Instead, I rocked alone, slowly, listening to the creak of old wood and the steady drum of regret tapping against my ribs. Here's the thing, no one tells you heartbreak isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a whisper in a dim room. Sometimes, it's a closed door. Sometimes, it's your son not calling after something like that happens. Old age wisdom. Here's mine. People don't always mean to break your heart, but that doesn't make the break any easier to live with. And did you know flamingos are pink because of the shrimp they eat? That popped into my head that night for no good reason. But grief does that. It grabs strange facts from the back of your brain to distract you from what's unraveling inside your chest. I sat there, in that chair, and realized I didn't know where I fit in anymore. Jason had a new family. Samantha had drawn the line. And me, well, I was starting to feel like a guest in a story I thought I had written. When Jason was born, I thought I had finally understood what people meant when they said their heart was walking around outside their body. He came into the world with a pair of lungs that could rival a tornado siren and a mop of dark hair that never quite settled down. His father, Mark, had laughed when the nurse handed him over, calling him a squirmy miracle. That's exactly what he was. But then Mark died. A heart attack at 39. Just didn't wake up one morning. I remember the stillness of the house that day. The way Jason crawled into my lap asking when Daddy would be back from work. I didn't have the words then. Sometimes I still don't. From that moment on, it was just the two of us. We made a life. A patchwork kind of life. School mornings with burnt toast. Evenings with cartoons and grading papers. I taught second grade back then. Half the kids in our small Ohio town had been in my class at some point. I'd get hugs in grocery store aisles, cards on holidays, even the occasional drawing of me as a superhero. Ms. Barrett with a cape and a red pen. But Jason, he was my reason, my focus. The boy who hated peas, loved dinosaurs, and insisted that I check under his bed every night until he was 9. He was clever, kind, and impossibly stubborn, and he never once made me feel like I wasn't enough. I remember one Christmas we didn't have much that year. Money had been tight after a car repair swallowed our savings, but I scraped together enough to buy him a second-hand telescope. He cried when he opened it, not because it was fancy or new, but because he knew how much I'd sacrificed to give him a piece of the stars. That's the kind of bond we had. That warm, invisible thread made of bedtime stories. Cold lunches packed with notes, and sleepy forehead kisses. I never had to say I love you for him to know, but I said it anyway, every day. So when he brought Samantha home for the first time, I welcomed her with open arms. She was pretty, sharp-eyed, and clearly smitten with Jason. A little closed off, sure, but I figured that was nerves. She didn't smile much, but when she did, it was like the sun breaking through clouds. I made pot roast, the way my mother used to. Jason raved about it, bragged on me like I was a 5-star chef. Samantha smiled politely and picked at her plate. That night, after they left, I told myself she was just adjusting, that love could smooth over anything. Their engagement came fast. Jason was over the moon. He wanted a small wedding, but Samantha leaned toward big. So we compromised. I helped where I could. I stitched lace onto her veil, put together welcome baskets for out-of-town guests, and even wrapped Jordan almonds in tiny mesh bags. I cried at the ceremony. Of course I did. And when Samantha told us she was pregnant, I nearly burst. A grandchild. A chance to pass on all the love I had poured into Jason. I imagined stroller walks through the park, baking cookies with sticky little fingers, reading Goodnight Moon for the 100th time. I started knitting before they even knew the baby's gender. Booties, blankets, a soft blue cap, just in case. Intimidates. Those early months were good. Samantha texted me baby bump updates. Jason sent sonograms. I printed every single one and stuck them to my fridge like art. They even let me help with the nursery. Soft yellows and greens. I hand-painted animals on the wall, little lions and elephants. Spent hours sanding that old rocking chair. That same chair I'd used for Jason. Everything felt just right. And then, it didn't. I guess if I'd been paying closer attention, I might have noticed the shift sooner. But when love is all you've ever known, it's hard to recognize when the ground beneath it starts to crack. It started with the baby shower. We were gathered around their kitchen table, planning the details. Samantha's friend Taylor was there, tapping away on her phone, throwing out ideas like chic woodland vibes and pastel balloon garlands. I pulled out a little spiral notebook, the kind teachers always have tucked in their purse. I had notes, lists, suggestions for a cozy community center gathering easy access, sentimental value. That building had hosted church potlucks, holiday bake sales, even Jason's 8th birthday. I said, I know the woman who manages it. I can get us a good rate. Samantha didn't even glance up from her phone. Yeah, Linda, that's cute, she said, voice flat. But we're thinking something a little more modern. Cute. That word slapped me harder than it should have. Taylor giggled. Jason cleared his throat. I smiled, tightly. Of course, I murmured. Whatever makes you happy. I just thought it might be nice. I spent the rest of that meeting trying not to feel like a relic, a dusty photo album no one flips through anymore. It's funny. That one word cute echoed in my head all the way home. Not because it was cruel, but because it said everything you're outdated. You don't understand. Stay in your lane. Old age insight. Sometimes the deepest wounds come in the smallest packages. 3 letters, 1 syllable, enough to hollow out your chest if it lands just right. Did you know lobsters never stop growing? They just keep molting and getting bigger until they die. Maybe people are like that too. We grow past what used to fit. And maybe, just maybe, I was a shell they had outgrown. That night, I sat on my porch with a blanket and a lukewarm cup of tea, watching the wind ripple through the trees. I told myself not to overthink, that Samantha was just tired, that maybe I was being too sensitive. But in my gut, I felt it, the line between beloved family and unwanted guest had been drawn. And I was standing on the wrong side. The strange thing about being pushed out is that it rarely happens all at once. It's not a slammed door or a shouted insult. It's quieter than that, more like someone gently, persistently closing a window you didn't know was open. One day, you're sitting in the middle of things, passing mashed potatoes, laughing at inside jokes, and the next, You're not even on the invite list." After the baby shower planning, I kept showing up. That's what moms do. We give people the benefit of the doubt, even when the doubt grows louder by the day. I offered to help wherever I could. I sent a few gift ideas when Samantha mentioned they needed a baby monitor. She didn't respond. Not even a thumbs up. I figured she must be busy. I mean, she was 8 months pregnant and juggling work. But the silence started stacking up like unread mail. Text messages that used to get a reply within minutes suddenly went ignored for days. Calls went unanswered. And when Jason finally did pick up, his voice sounded clipped like someone holding a phone they didn't really want to be holding. "Eliza's just sleeping a lot," he'd say. "We're swamped." I didn't push. I told myself to be patient. Then came the baby shower. It was lovely. I'll give them that. Samantha and Taylor had transformed a local winery into something out of a Pinterest dream. White balloons, eucalyptus garlands, little gold animals perched beside finger sandwiches with edible flowers. The kind of place where you felt like sneezing would be a crime against aesthetics, isn't it? I arrived in my best outfit, a soft peach blouse and navy slacks. Nothing flashy, but nice, respectful. No one greeted me at the door. Not Samantha, not Taylor, not even Jason, who had popped in briefly to carry in gifts before disappearing. I found a seat at the edge of the room, smiled, clapped, ate a deviled egg that was somehow too fancy to be recognizable as food. When it came time for the gift opening, I watched as Samantha unwrapped onesie after onesie, every label from expensive brands I couldn't pronounce. Then, finally, she pulled out a pale blue box tied with a white ribbon. "Mine!" She opened it. Inside was a handmade sweater I had spent weeks on soft yarn. Delicate buttons shaped like stars, and a little card that read, "For your little one. With love from Grandma." Samantha smiled faintly. She didn't read the card aloud. She didn't hold up the sweater. She placed it quietly back in the box and moved on to the next gift. And just like that, I disappeared again. Old age wisdom. If someone shows you they don't value your time or effort, believe them the first time. Don't wait for the sequel. That night, I drove home in silence. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I put the sweater pattern back in the drawer and didn't pick up the needles again for a long time. Over the next few weeks, the shift became impossible to ignore. The updates I used to get pictures of nursery progress. Funny texts from Jason. Videos of Ethan kicking in Samantha's belly stopped completely. Instead, I learned about things through social media. A pregnancy photo shoot, a new stroller, a crib delivered and assembled without a word to me. And when Ethan was finally born, I found out from a Facebook post. There he was, wrinkled in pink, eyes squinting, fists balled. Jason's caption, "Welcome to the world, Ethan Mark Barrett." Mark, named after his father. That was the part that gutted me most, because I didn't even know they'd chosen a name. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, refreshing it, hoping maybe there'd be a message waiting. "Oh, we can't wait for you to meet him," or "He looks just like you." But nothing came. I baked a loaf of cinnamon bread that night, the kind Jason used to beg for when he was sick, or sad, or needed something familiar. I wrapped it carefully in a dish towel, placed a tiny rattle beside it, and drove to their house the next morning. I didn't call ahead. I knew they were home. Samantha opened the door, Ethan tucked tightly in a baby wrap against her chest. She looked tired, and I told myself to be understanding. "Just wanted to drop these off," I said, holding up the bread and rattle. "Didn't mean to intrude." She took them without a word. Jason peeked out from behind her. His smile was tight, nervous. Inside, The house was dim and still, as if even the walls were tiptoeing around the baby. I washed my hands at the sink. I didn't ask. It was habit. Then I sat, gently, on the edge of the couch. "I'd love to hold him," I said softly. Samantha didn't respond. She adjusted Ethan's blanket, fed him, burped him, then placed him in a bassinet near the window, all without ever offering him to me. I sat there, hands folded, trying not to fidget. After a few minutes, I stood. "Well," I said, forcing brightness into my voice, "I'll get out of your hair." She didn't protest. I walked out slowly, listening to the sound of my own footsteps echo across the porch. The bread was still warm, the rattle unopened. That night, I sat in the spare bedroom, the one I'd quietly transformed into Ethan's room, a crib in the corner, picture books on the shelf. That same cream rocking chair by the window, waiting for a moment that might never come. I wept not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet way that grief creeps out when you finally stop trying to hold it all in. Did you know baby elephants suck their trunks like human babies suck their thumbs? It's how they comfort themselves. That night, I envied them. There's something strange about becoming invisible in the middle of your own life. You'd think there'd be a loud moment, a definitive break. But it doesn't happen like that. Not in families. Instead, it's 1,000 tiny things, half responses, missed calls. The way someone's eyes slide past you like you're a lamp in the corner of the room, useful, but unnoticed unless it flickers. After that visit, I didn't push. I told myself they needed time, that new parents were supposed to be overwhelmed, that I'd get a text next week, or maybe the week after. But the next time I heard from Jason was 2 weeks later. It was a group message. A picture of Ethan in a navy blue onesie, smiling toothless with big gummy cheeks. The caption read, "Ethan's first pediatrician visit our little champ." It went to 12 people, cousins, co-workers, friends. Not, "Hey mom, thought you'd want this." Not, "We'd love to have you over." Just a generic broadcast, like I was part of the background noise of their life. I stared at it for a long time. Typed out a response 3 times. Deleted it each time. Because what do you even say when you've been demoted from central cast to a blurry extra? I stopped offering to visit. I stopped baking bread. I stopped knitting sweaters that would never be worn. And as I stepped back, the silence got louder. My mornings, once so full preparing meals, planning lessons, checking in with Jason, became long stretches of coffee and crossword puzzles. I found myself staring out the kitchen window, watching Mrs. Franklin across the street garden with her grandkids. Their laughter floated over like little ghosts of a future I had once imagined for myself. Even church felt different. I used to beam when someone asked, "How's that grandson of yours?" Now, I smiled politely and said, "They're doing well," and steered the conversation toward the weather. But the worst part wasn't the absence. It was the erosion of meaning, the slow realization that all the things I had dreamed, the roles I'd rehearsed, were being performed by someone else. I remember walking into the grocery store one afternoon and bumping into Diane, my old friend from the PTA days. We hadn't talked in a while, mostly because I didn't have anything joyful to report. She hugged me tight and asked, "So, how's grandma life treating you?" I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. I couldn't say I'd held Ethan. I hadn't sung him a lullaby. I hadn't fed him or bathed him or rocked him to sleep. I didn't know if he liked music or if he had a birthmark behind his ear like Jason did. So I laughed, a thin, plastic kind of laugh. "Oh, you know," I said, "times have changed." And just like that, the conversation moved on. We talked about sales on canned soup, but all I could think was, how do you miss a baby you never really got to know? Old age wisdom. Grief isn't always about who you've lost. Sometimes it's about the future that's been quietly erased, one quiet refusal at a time. I started filling my time in odd ways, organizing the spice rack, rearranging bookshelves, cleaning the grout in the bathroom tile with a toothbrush. Anything to keep the ache from settling too deep. One day, I dropped off a package of diapers at their front door. Left it there without knocking. A small gesture. A peace offering. A hope. Samantha texted 2 hours later. "Thanks. We have enough for now. Nothing more." No smiley face, no come visit soon. Just a wall, neat and smooth, impossible to scale. A few days later, I spotted the little sweater I had knitted, stuffed into the back of a closet during a visit when I was meant to help with laundry. The tag still attached, the yarn still crisp. It hadn't been worn, not once. That night, I pulled the pattern out of my drawer and put it in the recycling bin. Did you know butterflies taste with their feet? Strange how something so delicate can still sense what's bitter the moment it touches it. I started journaling again. Something I hadn't done since Jason was little. It wasn't fancy. Just scribbles in a worn notebook. Lists of what I'd cooked that day. A note about the daffodils blooming early. The way the light hit the photo of Jason in his graduation robe. Each entry felt like carving initials into a tree that no one else would ever see. Eventually, I stopped writing his name, because I realized the person I was trying to reach wasn't reading anymore. Then came the Sunday barbecue. Jason had invited me, texted, even said it was a small thing. Burgers in the backyard, a few friends and neighbors. I felt a flicker of hope. I spent the morning making my famous potato salad extra paprika, just how Jason liked it. I wore a soft blue shirt and added a little floral pin I hadn't worn in years. Picked up a cloth book for Ethan about animals with big eyes and crinkly pages. Simple. Sweet. When I arrived, I stood at the gate for a moment. The backyard buzzed with life. Samantha bustling around arranging drinks, Jason flipping burgers, kids chasing bubbles, Ethan in his bouncy chair, kicking wildly beneath a shady canopy. It almost looked like the family dreams I used to have. I stepped inside, waving. Jason gave a distracted wave back. Samantha nodded barely. No one else said hello. I smiled anyway. Placed the potato salad on the table, took a deep breath, and walked over to Ethan. He looked up at me. His eyes sparkled. He waved his arms like a tiny king summoning his court. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered, crouching down. I reached out instinctively, gently, to brush a strand of hair from his forehead. And then, "Don't touch my baby." Samantha's voice cracked across the yard like glass shattering in a quiet room. Everything froze. Conversations halted. Cups paused mid-sip. Even Jason stiffened. I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned. "I was just saying hello," I said, barely above a whisper. Samantha turned away. Adjusted his blanket. Shielded him. As if I were dangerous. As if I didn't belong. Jason didn't speak. No one did. The laughter resumed eventually. But not the same. Lighter. Uneasy. I stood there a moment longer. Then I turned. Picked up my purse. Walked back through the gate. And drove home with the little cloth book still resting on the seat beside me, unread, untouched, unwanted. I didn't cry when I got home. I thought I would. I expected the flood, but it didn't come. Instead, I placed the book still pristine, still hopeful on the shelf in the spare bedroom, the one that used to hum with imagined lullabies and late-night visits. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat in the dark on the cream-colored rocking chair, listening to the creak of old wood and the silence it carried now. That was the night something inside me shifted. It wasn't a collapse, more like a surrender. Not of love, but of the fight to keep inserting myself where I was no longer welcome. Jason didn't call after that Sunday barbecue. Neither did Samantha. There were no apologies, no explanations, just silence. Clean, brutal, final. Later that week, Jason posted a photo on social media of Ethan clutching a stuffed giraffe, his favorite toy. The caption read, "I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't the lamb I had given him." That one never made it into a picture, never even made it into his room, far as I could tell. And I thought, maybe this is what it means to become background noise in your own story. To be the person who gave everything, and still somehow wasn't enough. I stopped texting, stopped offering, stopped imagining visits that would never come. You know the hardest part of grief? It's not the crying. It's the stillness after. The quiet settling of dust on furniture no one sits in anymore. That's what my life began to feel like. Still. Dusty. Paused. The days stretched long. I kept my routines, watered the garden, walked to the mailbox, nodded at Mrs. Franklin as she trimmed her hedges. But everything felt quieter now, like I was humming a song only I remembered the words to. Old age insight. Sometimes it's not the big losses that undo us. It's the small daily reminders that we're no longer central to someone else's world. I bumped into Diane again at the library. She was checking out a stack of cookbooks for her granddaughter's baking project. "She's trying to make that chocolate cake you used to bring to school events," she said, smiling warmly. I smiled back, but I felt something inside me falter. When Diane left, I sat in one of the worn leather chairs by the window. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, catching dust in its beams. I pulled a paperback from the shelf, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept replaying the barbecue, the sting of Samantha's voice, the silence of everyone else, the quiet pain of walking away like I didn't matter. I realized then that I'd been holding on to hope like it was a leash around my own neck. That maybe, just maybe, it was time to set myself free. Did you know sea otters hold hands when they sleep so they don't drift apart? I used to think that was the most beautiful thing. But now, I wondered what happened when one otter let go first. Did the other one just float away, quietly lost? I think that's what I'd been doing for months, floating. Hoping someone would reach out, take my hand, and pull me back to shore. But no one had, and I was tired of treading water. That weekend, I cleaned out the nursery. I started with the crib, dismantled it slowly, carefully. Each screw, each bolt, felt like letting go of something sacred. I folded the blankets, packed the tiny books, placed the little blue cap in a box marked memories. It wasn't bitterness. It was something gentler, like saying goodbye to someone who never really arrived. I didn't throw anything out. I'm not made of stone, but I put it all away. And then I sat in the middle of the room, cross-legged on the carpet, and let the silence wrap around me like a heavy coat. When I stood up, I was different. Not healed, not over it, just changed. Later that week, a flyer came in the mail from the community center Thanksgiving food drive coming up. Volunteers needed. Normally, I'd be the first to sign up. Bring pies, help with setup, stay late to clean. This time, I tucked the flyer into a drawer. Someone else would do it. I needed time to figure out who I was now, without being grandma, without being the mom who always showed up, the fixer, the helper, the background cheerleader. Because no matter how much I loved Jason, No matter how much I had dreamed about Ethan, I couldn't keep offering love into a void. I couldn't keep pouring myself into spaces that treated my affection like a burden. It wasn't anger that made me step back. It wasn't pride. It was grief, plain and deep. And it had taken root. I stopped showing up everywhere. Not just for them, but for everything that once gave me comfort and now reminded me of what I'd lost.
The old church pew I used to sit in empty now.
The recipe book I kept open on the counter, closed, and tucked away. The rocking chair. It stayed by the window, but I stopped sitting in it. Sometimes, I'd find myself standing at the kitchen sink, staring out the window, unable to remember what I was doing, just drifting. Did you know jellyfish have survived 5 mass extinctions? They just float, without brains, without hearts, just surviving.
Some days I envied them.
No memories, no expectations, just water and motion. But then, I remembered something my own mother used to say when she was grieving after my father passed. You can only float for so long before your feet touch something solid again. I didn't know what that solid thing would be, but I knew I couldn't stay adrift forever. A week or so after I packed up the nursery, I found myself in the attic. It wasn't planned. It never is with those kinds of moments. One minute, I was trying to find an old fall wreath, something to hang on the front door just to make the place feel alive again. The next, I was standing in a cloud of dust, ankle deep in boxes that hadn't been opened since Jason left for college. The attic smelled like cedar and thyme, a mix of yellowing paper, forgotten sweaters, and the musty warmth of memories you don't know how to revisit. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, which, of course, is always when you find what you didn't know you needed. At the back corner, underneath a box labeled Jason Grade School, I found a battered leather trunk. The lock was rusted. The corners frayed. I recognized it instantly. Mark's old storage chest. I hadn't opened it in years. Those. I crouched beside it, brushing away a layer of dust. The latch gave way with a reluctant creak. And inside, I found old fishing rods, a few hand-carved lures, and a stack of neatly packed photo albums. I ran my fingers over the top one and pulled it out. But it wasn't the albums that undid me. It was the journal tucked beneath them. Brown leather, cracked along the spine, with a gold-inked C.B. on the bottom corner. I knew that handwriting before I even opened it. Jason's. I sat down right there on the wooden floor, legs crossed like a kid again, the journal heavy in my hands. I hesitated. It felt like trespassing. But something in me, maybe the part that still ached to hear his voice, any version of it needed to read it. The first few pages were what you'd expect ramblings about homework, songs he liked, a doodle of a spaceship, and a cartoon burger. But halfway through, dated just after his 18th birthday, I found a single, simple entry. Mom is my hero. She's the only one who never gave up on me, even when I didn't deserve it. I hope one day I can be that kind of parent. If I ever have kids, I want them to feel what I felt growing up, that kind of love that never quits, even when it hurts. I pressed the journal to my chest and let my body fold in on itself. There it was. Proof that I hadn't imagined it, that the love I gave, the years I poured into him, the sacrifices that once felt invisible, he had seen it. He knew.
Somewhere along the way, we had both forgotten.
But this page, this single, quiet testament, reminded me. Love doesn't always show itself in real time. Sometimes it takes years, decades. Sometimes it takes a dusty attic on a gray Tuesday afternoon to bring it back. Old age insight. The love you plant doesn't always bloom where or when you expect. But if it's real, it roots deep. I stayed in that attic for a long time. The journal open in my lap, tears sliding down without drama or sound. It didn't fix everything, but it filled something that had gone hollow inside me. When I finally came down the stairs, the house felt less empty. Not because Jason or Ethan were suddenly there, but because I was there again. The part of me that had felt erased, it had left a trace. It still mattered. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and a mug of peppermint tea. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that nips at your cheeks but doesn't quite make you shiver. I looked up at the stars, thinking about that telescope I once gave Jason. The one he cried over. I wondered if he remembered it. I wondered if he ever thought about those nights we'd lie on a blanket in the backyard, him pointing at constellations and asking if heaven had windows. Maybe it does. Maybe love is what slips through when they're open. I made a quiet promise to myself then I wouldn't beg to be let back in. But I wouldn't close myself off either. Love isn't a switch. You can't flip it off when people hurt you. You can only decide how you carry it. And I would carry mine gently, not like a wound, but like a light. Did you know monarch butterflies migrate over 500 miles without ever having made the journey before? They just know where to go. I think maybe our hearts are a little like that. They know how to find their way back if we let them. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called Diane. We hadn't really talked since the library, and I wasn't even sure what I'd say. But she picked up on the second ring. Linda. Her voice was surprised, warm. Are you okay? And just like that, the dam broke. We talked for 2 hours. About Jason, about Ethan, about grief and loneliness, and how exhausting it is to always be the one who loves hardest. She listened without interruption. And when I hung up, I felt lighter. That weekend, I dropped off a pie at the church for the community supper. No fanfare, just placed it on the table with a small note baked with love. L. B. I didn't stay, but it was a start. The following Monday, I signed up for Saturday story hours at the library. Just 1 hour a week, reading to kids who still believed in dragons and dinosaurs, kids who laughed when you did voices and hugged you with sticky fingers. It wasn't grandparenting, but it was connection. It was love, landing somewhere. That night, I opened a fresh journal and wrote my own entry for the first time in years. You're still here. You still matter, even if no one sees it today. And somehow, that was enough. The thing about rebuilding your life quietly is no one notices. They see you smile at the grocery store, wave from your porch, nod politely in the church hallway, and think you're fine. And maybe, some days, you are. But most days, you're just putting one foot in front of the other, carrying invisible weight. And still, something inside me had changed since I found Jason's journal. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't wake up bursting with purpose, but the ache in my chest had softened. Just a little. Like the difference between a fresh bruise and one that's begun to yellow around the edges. I started cooking again, not for anyone in particular, just for me. Chicken pot pie, apple cobbler, dishes I hadn't made since Mark passed. There was something healing in kneading dough and tasting something warm and buttery from your own hands. I pulled out old photo albums, too. Not to cry, just to remember. To give myself the gift of saying yes, that really happened. That love was real. One afternoon, I was sorting through a stack of baby pictures, Jason grinning, cheeks smeared with frosting when my phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it. Because it was him. Jason? Just one line. Hey, Mom, how have you been? I stared at the screen, not moving. My tea went cold. My breath caught. But here's the thing, I didn't feel desperate anymore. I didn't rush to reply. Didn't type out 6 paragraphs and delete them in a panic. Instead, I took a deep breath, then finished what I was doing. I looked through the rest of the photos, folded the album closed, poured myself a fresh cup of tea, and then I responded. Hi, sweetheart. I've been doing well. Hope you all are too. That was it. No questions, no pleas, just peace. Old age insight. Sometimes dignity is quieter than silence. 2 days later, another message arrived. Ethan's first birthday is coming up. We're planning a little get-together. Would love if you could come. Would love. Not need. Not expect. Not bring the potato salad. It was the first time in months that an invitation didn't feel like a lifeline being yanked away just as I reached for it. It was a real offer. One I could accept or decline on my own terms. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked down to the library, read The Very Hungry Caterpillar to a room full of squirmy toddlers. One little girl tugged on my sleeve afterward and whispered, "You sound like a grandma." And I smiled so big my cheeks hurt. When I got home, I texted Jason back. I'd be honored to come. Thank you for thinking of me. Simple, soft, sincere. It didn't undo the pain, but it felt like a step. Did you know whales can remember the songs of their pod for decades? Even after being separated by oceans, I think we carry the melodies of those we love deep inside us, even when the lyrics get lost for a while. The day of Ethan's birthday came fast. I wrapped a gift, not homemade, not overthought, just a little wooden-shaped puzzle with bright colors and chunky handles for tiny hands. I wrote a card, too. To Ethan, happy birthday. Sweetheart. Love always. Grandma Linda. No expectations. When I arrived, the backyard looked almost exactly like it had the day of that awful barbecue. Same string lights. Same folding chairs. Same soft breeze tugging at the paper napkins. But something was different. Jason met me at the gate, smiling, not forced, not polite, real. He reached out and hugged me, firm and full. Glad you're here, he said. And I believed him. Inside, I spotted Ethan wobbling across the grass, a cupcake smushed in one hand, frosting on his nose. Samantha was nearby, helping a friend set up drinks. When she saw me, her face went still. But then, after a pause that felt like an entire season, she walked over. Hi, Linda, she said. Her voice was calm, clear. Hi, Samantha. Thank you for having me. She nodded. He's been saying Gamma all week. Thought it was gibberish until he pointed at your picture on the fridge. I smiled. It took everything in me not to cry. She motioned toward the porch. He's due for a nap soon, if you'd like to rock him. He sleeps best that way. For a second, I didn't move. I was waiting for the catch, the sting, the pullback, but it didn't come. I nodded. I'd love to. A few minutes later, I sat on their back porch, Ethan curled against my shoulder, warm and drowsy. His breath rose and fell, slow and safe. He smelled like sunscreen and vanilla frosting. The rocking chair creaked gently under us, and the world faded to a quiet rhythm. Jason stood in the doorway, watching us, his face unreadable for a moment. Then he stepped forward, placed a hand on my shoulder, and said softly, "Thanks. Mom, not for the gift, not for showing up. Just thanks." And in that moment, I felt it. I hadn't imagined the love. I hadn't wasted the years. I hadn't disappeared. I had been there all along, steady, quiet, waiting like the roots of an old tree. And now, finally, they'd come to rest in its shade. That birthday afternoon left me sitting in my car longer than I care to admit.
Not because I was upset.
But because I didn't want the moment to end. Ethan had fallen asleep on my shoulder, warm and trusting. Samantha had smiled, really smiled when she watched me settle him in the rocker. And Jason, bless him, had even wrapped an arm gently around my back as I stood to leave, like a son who remembered who he came from. When I turned the key in the ignition, the radio kicked on, some jazz station I'd never listened to before. I let it play. It felt fitting, something soft, unexpected, and a little bit brave. The next day, I received a photo from Jason. Ethan, curled up in the blanket I'd knit so many months ago. The one I thought would never see the light of day. The one I'd folded away in a cedar chest with a whisper of surrender. "He won't nap without this now," the message read. I stared at that photo for a long time. And for the first time in a very long while, I let myself feel proud, not just of that blanket or that day, but of myself. For standing in the quiet, for loving without forcing, and for finding strength in the waiting. There's a quote I once heard, don't remember where, probably stitched onto a pillow or buried in a self-help book in a waiting room. It went something like this: grace is not about who deserves what. It's about loving people even when they don't yet know how to love you back. And I think I lived that, even when it hurt. That week, Samantha texted me. A simple message, "Would you like to come for dinner Wednesday night, just us?" I paused. Not because I didn't want to go, but because I realized I didn't need it like I used to. I wasn't gripping their invitation like a woman clinging to a cliff's edge. I was whole now. I could say yes from a place of abundance, not emptiness. I replied, "I'd love to. Thank you for asking." And when Wednesday came, I pulled out a simple casserole recipe, the kind that fills a room with the smell of safety and home. I didn't overthink it. I just cooked like I always have quiet love in the form of melted cheese and perfectly crisp edges. When I arrived, Ethan greeted me at the door with a loud gamma. He threw his little arms around my knees and looked up with such confidence, as if I had always been there. I scooped him up, and Samantha smiled from the kitchen. Her hair was loose for once, and she looked softer, lighter somehow. We ate spaghetti and salad, garlic bread, too. Nothing fancy, but it felt like a feast. Samantha asked me about the story hour at the library. Jason asked for my peach cobbler recipe. We laughed. We passed dishes. We refilled each other's glasses without asking. It felt like something new. Not a return to the past. Not a pretend version of the family I once imagined. But something real, grown from honesty and bruised knees and slow forgiveness. After dinner, Jason cleaned up while Samantha and I sat on the couch, Ethan climbing back and forth between us like a little mountain goat. And then, when he finally fell asleep on the floor with his blanket and a book clutched to his chest, she turned to me. Her voice was quiet, tentative. "I was scared," she said. I didn't say anything. I just listened. I didn't know how to share him. I didn't even know how to be a mom. And when you came in so sure, so loving, it made me feel inadequate, like I was already failing. I reached over and gently touched her hand. "You were never failing," I said. "You were learning. We both were." She nodded, eyes glassy. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see that you weren't trying to take anything. You were trying to give something, and I didn't know how to accept it." "I'm still here," I said. "I always was." We sat there in silence,
the kind that says more than words ever could. Did you know foxes use the Earth's magnetic field to hunt? They can literally sense the pull of the planet and use it to align themselves when they leap. It sounds impossible, right? But somehow, nature always finds a way back to center.
So do we, I think.
Later that evening, as I drove home under a sky full of stars, I realized I was no longer aching for their attention. I wasn't measuring my worth by whether I was invited or not. I had made peace with the quiet. And now, the sound of being wanted, well, that was just a gift. One I could receive freely. When I got home, I placed the empty casserole dish in the sink and poured myself a glass of water. I stood by the window and looked out at the garden, the porch swing, the life I had kept alive while I waited.
It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud.
But it was mine. And it had become enough. The next few weeks unfolded like soft petals. Not all at once, but slowly, carefully, as if the universe wasn't sure I was ready to bloom just yet. And I wasn't, not completely, but I could feel something easing inside me, like a too-tight coat being unbuttoned for the first time in years.
Samantha began texting me little things.
A photo of Ethan in a pumpkin patch, cheeks flushed pink from the chill.
A question about whether applesauce could be substituted in her mother's muffin recipe. An invitation to come over on Saturday morning and help with a craft for Ethan's preschool. It wasn't performative. It wasn't obligatory. It felt sincere. That first Saturday, I arrived with a bag of pipe cleaners, googly eyes, and construction paper in fall colors. It was one of those cool mornings when the light slants just right and everything smells faintly of cinnamon and cold. Ethan met me at the door again, sticky from syrup and still in his pajamas. Samantha greeted me with a soft smile and a cup of tea. And as we sat at the dining room table, Ethan smearing glue onto paper leaves, me cutting orange felt into the shape of tiny pumpkins, something quiet and meaningful passed between us. A kind of forgiveness. Not of dramatic wrongdoing, but of assumptions. Of fear. Of the hard, messy learning curve of love. We didn't talk about the past. Not directly. But when Samantha reached for my hand at one point to help her straighten a crooked piece of construction paper, she didn't pull away. And that, for me, was enough. Old age insight. Sometimes reconciliation doesn't look like fireworks or big speeches. Sometimes it's just two people gluing googly eyes onto paper turkeys side by side, breathing easier than they did the week before. The library story hours continued, too. I started knowing the kids by name Lila, who insisted every book must have a dragon, even if it didn't. Miles, who only liked books with cats. And Zoe, who always asked if I was someone's grandma. Yes, I told her once, and also a storyteller. She seemed satisfied with that. Did you know crows can remember individual human faces and even pass that knowledge on to other crows? They remember who was kind and who wasn't. I think children are a little like that too. They sense love, real love, even when the world gets complicated. At Thanksgiving, I wasn't sure what to expect. I hadn't been invited the year before. That one had passed quietly, with a microwaved turkey dinner and a rerun of It's a Wonderful Life. But this time, Samantha called me herself. "We'd love for you to come," she said. "It wouldn't feel right without you." I paused, holding the phone to my ear, trying to gauge her tone. There was no edge, no reluctance, just a woman, now a mother, offering a seat at her table. "I'd be honored," I replied. I made 2 pies, apple and pecan, and brought my old lace table runner, the one Jason used to spill cranberry sauce on every year without fail. When I walked into their home that afternoon, the smell of roasted turkey and sage hit me like a memory from a time I'd thought was gone for good.
Jason greeted me at the door and kissed my cheek. Samantha took the pies and set them gently on the counter, no longer treating my offerings like antique curiosities. And Ethan? He ran to me like I was the main event. After dinner, we sat in the living room, sipping coffee and nibbling on leftovers. Jason put on a record, an old jazz album I used to play on Sunday mornings while cleaning. He remembered. "I found it at a flea market," he said, grinning. "Thought you'd like it." I did more than like it. I wanted to weep. But instead, I closed my eyes and let the music wrap around me like an old, familiar sweater. Later that night, after the dishes were done and Ethan was fast asleep with my blanket tucked up to his chin, Samantha and I found ourselves alone on the back porch. She was wrapped in a thick cardigan, her fingers curled around a mug of cider. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to be afraid that if I let you get too close, I'd disappear. That Ethan would love you more than he loved me." I looked at her. She wasn't avoiding eye contact anymore. "But now I see," she continued, "that loving someone doesn't divide the love, it multiplies it." I reached out and touched her hand. "I never wanted to replace you. I just wanted to belong." "You do," she said. It was the simplest sentence in the world, and the most powerful. "You do." Not "you can" or "you might." "You do." It didn't erase the past. It didn't cancel out all the times I'd felt like a ghost in the life I helped build. But it gave shape to the future. A future where I didn't have to guess or tiptoe. Where my presence was welcome, not merely tolerated. As I drove home that night, the roads quiet and lined with bare trees, I felt something new settle into me. Not relief, not pride, but peace. The kind that doesn't make noise, the kind that lingers. I rolled down the window, just slightly, let the cold November air brush against my face. And for the first time in a long while, I whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular. Just to the night, to the road, to the quiet wisdom of time. It was a Tuesday morning when I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for a text, not for an invitation, not for permission to feel whole. I'd just finished folding laundry when I paused in the hallway, caught by the soft creak of the rocking chair in the nursery room, the one I had kept. Not as a shrine, but as a promise. I had left the door cracked open months ago, and something about the way the morning sun was pooling across the wooden floor made me stop and lean gently against the doorframe. There was no crib anymore, no diaper caddy or bottle warmer. But on the shelf sat 3 of Ethan's board books, borrowed and returned with fingerprints and crayon marks as proof he'd been here. His blanket, the one I had knitted, was folded neatly on the chair, no longer waiting, but simply ready. That small room didn't ache the way it once did. It breathed. There's a calm that comes from being seen again. Not as a fixture, not as a nuisance, but as a person with love to give and stories still to tell. That same afternoon, I received a text from Samantha. "Would you like to come to Ethan's holiday recital next week? He keeps asking if Grandma will be there." I stared at it, smiling so wide I had to sit down. Yes, 1,000 times yes. But I didn't reply right away. Not because I wasn't excited, but because I'd learned the beauty of letting an answer come from peace, not desperation. A few hours later, after reading to the preschoolers at the library and talking with little Miles about how cats probably don't celebrate Christmas, he strongly disagreed. I finally texted back, "I wouldn't miss it for the world. Thank you for including me." This time, she responded right away. "He'll be so happy. We are too." It was the first "we" in a long time that felt like it meant me, too. Old age insight. Healing isn't a door swinging wide open. It's a series of soft clicks. locks coming undone, one by one, until you suddenly realize you're no longer on the outside. At the recital, Ethan wore a tiny paper snowman hat and jingled with every step. When he spotted me in the crowd, he lit up like the lights on the little Christmas tree behind him. He pointed and shouted, Gamma loud enough to earn a few chuckles from the other parents. Samantha glanced back from her seat and smiled at me. And it wasn't forced. After the performance, 6 minutes of singing and chaotic bell ringing, we all gathered in the cafeteria for cocoa and cookies. I sat beside Ethan while he showed me the glitter-covered pine cone ornament he'd made. When he offered it to me, proudly saying, "This one's for you," I nearly cried. I didn't, but my hands shook as I took it. And now, it hangs in my living room window. A lopsided, gluey little thing that might be the most beautiful gift I've ever received. Later that week, Jason called. Not texted. Called. I nearly dropped a mixing bowl when I saw his name light up the screen. "Hi, Mom," he said. "I was just thinking. It's been a while since it was just the two of us. Want to go for a walk? Grab coffee." My throat tightened. I'd love that. We met at the old trail by Riverbend Park, the same one where we used to ride bikes when he was small, where Mark once taught him to skip rocks. We walked quietly at first. The air was cold, but not bitter, just enough to make our words feel warm when we finally spoke. "I found my old journal the other day," Jason said after a while. "The one you packed up when I left for college." I smiled. I read a few pages of it myself. He glanced sideways. "Yeah." I nodded. "You wrote something about wanting to be a parent like me, about hoping your kids felt loved like you did." He didn't respond right away. We kept walking. Then he stopped, turned toward me. "I forgot about that," he said softly, "but I meant it." I blinked quickly. "I know you did." "I'm sorry I lost sight of it," he added. "I think I got so caught up in protecting our little family. I forgot you are our family." I reached out, brushing a stray leaf from his coat. "I never needed to be in charge," I said. "I just wanted to be close." He nodded. "We're still learning, but I see it now." Did you know trees in a forest share nutrients through their roots? Even across species, even in the dead of winter. They look out for each other underground, silently sustaining life when nothing else is blooming. That's what it felt like, standing there with Jason. Not a loud reconciliation, but a quiet exchange of something life-giving, unseen, undeniable. Before we left, he reached into his coat pocket. "I brought this," he said, pulling out a small folded paper. It was a photo of me holding baby Jason, both of us laughing, eyes squinted against the sun. "I found it in Dad's old stuff," he said. "I've been keeping it in my wallet." I pressed it to my chest for a moment before handing it back. "Looks like we were doing just fine," I said. Jason smiled. We are." We walked the rest of the trail without speaking. And when we reached the parking lot, he hugged me like he meant it. I drove home slowly, hands relaxed on the wheel, heart full. Not just from being loved, but from being remembered. I didn't realize how tightly I had been holding my breath until I exhaled it into winter. Not metaphorically, literally. One evening, maybe a week after that walk with Jason, I stepped out onto the porch with a cup of chamomile tea, and the air hit me like clarity. Crisp, cold, honest. It filled my lungs and emptied something else I hadn't noticed clinging their tension. Expectation. All those knots I'd tied around my heart to keep it from breaking. They were loosening. I stood under the porch light, looking out at the garden. The daffodils had long since given way to frosted soil. But I'd left the little ceramic bunny near the rose bushes, a marker of hope. He sat there, still cheerful, still upright, even through storms. Maybe I was that bunny now. The next morning, I received an envelope in the mail. Not a bill, not a flyer, real paper, real ink. Inside was a card with Ethan's scribbles and Samantha's careful handwriting underneath. Thank you for always showing up. Love, Sam.
No occasion, no attached obligation.
Just a thank you. I placed it on my fridge, right next to a drawing of what Ethan said was a grandma robot who makes pancakes with laser eyes.
Close enough.
That Friday, I got a call from Diane. We're organizing a little winter fair at the community center, she said. We need someone to read to the kids, preferably someone warm, patient, and not afraid of reindeer antlers. I laughed. You had me at antlers. So I dug out my red scarf and a pair of mittens with snowflakes on them and prepared to step into something I hadn't touched in years, joy without strings. The fair was loud, chaotic, and absolutely perfect. I read The Snowy Day while little ones sat on the floor, squirming in their puffer coats. I made my voice deep and silly for the snowball scenes and soft and sleepy for the ending. Afterward, a girl with a missing front tooth came up and asked, "Can I come to your house sometime?" I smiled. Well, I think your parents might have something to say about that, sweetie. She frowned, but only for a second. Can I just pretend you're my story grandma? Then, I almost cried. Of course, I said, brushing a curl from her forehead. That sounds just right. Old age insight. You don't always get the family you imagined, but you can still become someone's home. A few days later, Jason called again. No reason, no big ass. Just, hey mom, how's your day? I told him about the girl with the missing tooth, and he chuckled. She sounds like a mini you. I could hear Ethan babbling in the background, then shouting, Gamma, as if he knew I was on the other end. Jason asked if I'd be free the following weekend. We're thinking of doing a movie night. Popcorn? Hot chocolate? Want to join? I'd love to, I said. And I meant it. The following Saturday, I arrived with peppermint marshmallows and my old fleece blanket. Ethan greeted me in Christmas pajamas, already sticky from candy canes. Samantha handed me a mug of cocoa, and Jason queued up an animated movie I couldn't quite follow, but that didn't matter. Because halfway through, Ethan crawled into my lap with a heavy sigh, pulled the blanket over his shoulders, and said, Best spot. Just like that. Best spot. I held him close and let the tears come silently, the way they sometimes do when joy catches you off guard. Samantha leaned over at one point and whispered, He tells everyone at preschool that you're his best friend. I smiled. I feel the same. Later, after the credits rolled and Ethan was carried off to bed in a sugar-sleepy haze, Jason and I stood in the kitchen rinsing mugs. Jitil. I've missed this, he said, looking at me, not through me, not past me, at me. I didn't go anywhere, I replied. I know, he said, but I'm sorry for making it feel like you had to wait outside. I didn't say anything, because I didn't need to. The apology wasn't overdue. It was just finally landing. Did you know sea turtles return to the exact beach where they were born sometimes after decades? They travel thousands of miles and still find their way back. I think love is like that too. Sometimes it takes years, but the real kind, the kind that's born from something deep and good, it knows where home is. The next morning, I found a surprise on my front porch. A small potted amaryllis, just beginning to bloom. Tucked underneath the pot was a folded paper, crayon written and covered in stickers for Gamma. So your flowers don't have to be lonely. Ethan's handwriting, messy, perfect. I placed the pot in the nursery room, next to the rocking chair. And I sat there for a long time. Not mourning. Not waiting. Just breathing. Whole. Still here. The first snow of winter fell soft and slow. I stood by the front window, the same one that used to ache with silence, and watched the world turn white. Not in a sudden storm, just a quiet, steady drifting. The kind of snow that erases sharp edges, that hushes the whole earth. Ethan's amaryllis had begun to bloom on the windowsill, a single bold red blossom stretching toward the light like it knew something I didn't. That morning, I wrapped a scarf around my shoulders and walked out to the porch with a mug of tea. I watched the flakes gather on the railing, melt, and then begin to stick. The air smelled clean, empty in the best kind of way. A message buzzed in my pocket. Jason.
We're baking cookies this afternoon. Ethan wants to decorate one just for you. Come if you're free.
There was no guilt, no pressure, just an open door.
And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to weigh my worth before replying. I didn't have to hold my breath or second guess whether I was wanted. I just said yes.
Because now, I believed it. I bundled up and drove over, the roads damp with slush. Their house was lit up with tiny white lights, candles in the windows. When I knocked, it was Ethan who answered, his little hands sticky with dough, his face already dusted in flour. Gamma, he squealed, running back to the kitchen without another word. Samantha looked up from the counter. You're just in time. He saved the snowman cookie for you. Jason smiled, nudging a bowl of sprinkles my way. We figured you'd bring the magic touch. I laughed. You're just saying that because I once brought an anatomically incorrect gingerbread mousse to a school party. Jason grinned. Still the most memorable cookie of 3rd grade. We baked. We decorated. We danced around to silly holiday music. Ethan made a gingerbread man with a candy cane hat and 2 different shoes. He held it up proudly. This one's for Gamma's tree. Later, we all sat by the fire, sipping hot cider and watching the snow build outside. Ethan climbed into my lap, already drowsy, and whispered, I like when you're here. It feels warm. I pressed my cheek against his hair and let the words soak into me like sunlight. Not long ago, I might have cried at a moment like that. But tonight, I didn't need to cry. I just needed to feel it. Old age insight. The deepest joys often arrive not with trumpets, but with toddler whispers and the weight of a child sleeping safely against your heart. After Ethan went to bed, I helped Jason and Samantha put away the last of the dishes. There was no ceremony, no need for declarations. Just ease. Just love. As I pulled on my coat to leave, Samantha hugged me, tight. No hesitation. I'm really glad you didn't give up on us, she said quietly. I held her for a moment, then pulled back and said the truest thing I know. I did give up, for a little while, but love doesn't go anywhere. It just waits in the quiet. She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. We're really lucky you waited. That night, I sat in the rocking chair beside the amaryllis, watching the snow pile high under the street lamp. I thought about the journey, about the heartbreak, the silence, the grief of feeling erased. And then I thought about the re-entry, the slow, stumbling, beautiful return. Of Ethan's first hug, of Samantha's first honest apology, of Jason remembering the sound of his mother's voice not as an echo, but as part of his story. It didn't come with drama. It came with doors left unlocked, and cookies shared, and tiny pinecone ornaments hung on crooked branches. It came with space, and time, and stubborn, unwavering love. Did you know wolves return to the same den year after year, even after fire or storm, if they sense it's still home? I think we're not so different. As the fire crackled, and the amaryllis stretched a little taller. I knew one thing with full certainty.
I hadn't just been invited back into their lives.
I had walked back in on my own 2 feet, carrying the love I never stopped offering. And this time, they saw me. They truly saw me. Not as the background. Not as the backup. But as part of the center. And this time I saw me, too. No longer defined by how much I'm needed, but by how deeply I can still love, even after everything. That is the quietest kind of power. That is the most honest kind of grace. And as the snow blanketed the world outside, I closed my eyes and let peace settle in real, rooted, and mine. So here we are, friend. The snow has fallen, the tea has gone cold, and the story, it's come full circle. If you're still with me listening, resting, maybe even reflecting, thank you. Because stories like this, they aren't about fireworks or finales. They're about finding light in ordinary places. They're about the small, gentle ways we survive things we thought might break us. I learned something in the quiet. That love, real love, doesn't always return in the way we expect. Sometimes it disappears for a while. Sometimes it gets reshaped by fear, by pride, by change. But it doesn't disappear completely. It just waits soft and stubborn beneath the snow, ready to bloom when the sun comes back. I hope you know that. I hope that if you've ever felt forgotten or unseen, you remember this. You are still here. You are still worthy. And the love you've given, even if unreturned, has not vanished. It's out there somewhere, in a child's laugh, in a smile passed across a table, in the way your story quietly teaches someone else how to keep going. So take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. Let the quiet feel kind, not empty. You've walked a long way to get here, and you're still walking, even if it doesn't always feel like it. And if tonight feels heavy, that's okay. But I promise you, the sun will rise. You are not alone. You are not invisible. You are a garden still in bloom. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. And if this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone or of something inside yourself, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video. Subscribe if this is the kind of truth your heart needs more of. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? You never know. Someone might read your words and feel just a little less alone.